golden jade crown is from Korea, and it's from the Three Kingdoms period in the Silla Kingdom. And I have a picture on the left, that's the actual golden jade crown. And then the one on the right is actually just, so you can see kind of how it fits and what it would look like in full regalia during the ceremony that it might be worn in. So context, you heard me mention the Silla Kingdom, and during this time period in Korea, the Silla Kingdom was one of the three kingdoms in Korea, and I would say the Silla Kingdom is the most powerful of the three. These crowns, and by the way, this is the 5th or 6th century ACE, so we're thinking 400s to 500s, so around that time period in Korea. Crowns were used in really two different ways. You would wear them in ceremonies during someone's lifetime, and then the person would be buried with the crown, so it would also be used during burial rituals. But these crowns, of course, are only just for Silla royalty, and the burial practices in Korea have come from influence from China, like burying people with objects and goods to reflect their status was something that the Koreans, again, got from the Chinese. So I'd say that'd be important to know, because seeing those connections between cultures is probably something that the College Board would like you to know. So before Korea became primarily Buddhist, Koreans practiced a religion known as shamanism. And we'll be talking about shamanism when we look at art from Japan and different parts of Asia. But shamanism is more like nature worship, and it requires a figurehead called a shaman. Kind of think of it like a priest-like figure, and that shaman is helping the community intermediary between the spirits and the divine and the people on earth. So that would explain, I think, some of the organic features that we will talk about with this particular piece. And it connects to this idea, which is an old idea that we've talked about. We're going to talk about it more in the pieces to come, is axis mundi. So that connection, it could be a place, it could be a building. In this case, in Korea here, it was a sacred tree. And that tree was the axis mundi for the Silla Kingdom. And it's where heaven and earth connected together. So that also explains why we're going to see some tree imagery in this piece. So let's go on to content and finish this piece up. Maybe not. There we go. So content, again, this is worn. I show you the picture worn in ceremonies and then buried with the individual, probably wearing it as he or she is buried. It would kind of wrap around the forehead there. But the more important parts are just the features on it and how it looks. Clearly, materials are important as well. Jade and gold, clearly rarer materials, and jade being more difficult to work with. So the materials are going to suggest the power of the individual. The tree-shaped vertical elements, and it almost seems like leaves as well, those more being in the center. That's a reference to the sacred tree, that axis mundi. So when a person's wearing this, it's that connection between the person and a spiritual power. There are also reindeer, kind of antler on the sides, or at least shapes or forms that remind people of reindeer antlers. And in Korea, there's an area north, like a grassy land area, called the Eurasian steppe. And there were lots of reindeer there, so we think that's perhaps the influence here. And also that connection to the Eurasian steppe geographic region just north of this area of Korea, that people from that area are also making golden crowns with organic imagery. So not only are the Korean artists here influenced from art in China, they're also, I think what's important to know is the influence of these golden crowns and some of the shapes on this particular crown coming from an area just north of Korea here called the Eurasian Steppe. And then a third influence is through the Silk Road. And the Silk Road being a number of trade routes kind of connecting the West and the East, we think some jewelry techniques that were utilized, especially like in Rome and other places like Greece and Rome, that some metal making techniques found their way over into the East and Asia, like Korea, from just trade and interaction with people from the Mediterranean. So that's another piece of influence here, and I think that's an important connection and thing to remember with this piece. You've got gold discs dangling down from the main structure of the piece, and then you have these beautiful jade ornaments called gogok. And those, I put a little tiny picture there so you could see what they look like. They look like little veins, like they're curved. And anything green or greenish white on the crown, those are the jade. And that symbolizes like fruit, this ripe fruit hanging from the sacred tree, which would represent fertility, abundance, and all of that beautiful imagery that would be associated with that. And then clearly, then the crown is going to symbolize power. So let's talk a little bit about formal qualities and function with this. Function then would be power. Function also is funerary and ceremonial. Power because in ceremonies and in burial, it represents power. And then in the wearer, royalty would wear it during official ceremonies and then also be buried with the crown to just reinforce the status of the individual. And then formal qualities, I think form, just because the form is so connected to tree and natural organic imagery, relating it so clearly to religion of this time period and the shamanistic faith and that axis mundi sacred tree. So when you're wearing it, the royal figure would be connected to the divine. And I can't not mention with this one, a related work from the course would be the Merovingian fibula, or that barbarian piece, the pin clasp, that similarly is made from these beautiful materials and also is expressing power and then is buried with the individual after he dies. So again, this is the gold and jade crown from Korea in the Silla Kingdom.